history here is very dramatic and emotional. But then the most important aspect is the lesson learned from this place. We first have a look inside the condemned cell. We talk about some folklore there. Have a look in the male dungeons before we move upstairs. See some of the rooms the Europeans were using there to end everything at the door or the gate of no return. The whole experience here should take us an hour. But I would plead we all move as a team, because the more others delay would add up to the experience. We are inside Cape Coast Castle, and others do call this place Cape Coast Slave.
Thank you so much.
The structure we are seeing here happens to be the third and the smallest castle that was built by the Europeans when they came. The coast of West Africa, we estimate about 60 forts and castles to be built here. Yet that Ghana alone had more than 40 of them, and was all because of gold. That made the Portuguese actually name this place as the Gold Coast. Nigeria, Benin, Niger, and a section of Togo had the name Slave Coast, because that was where a lot of the West Africans actually were captured from. So places like Ivory Coast, Grain Coast, and others got the names based on the particular resource they were getting from the lands. A lot of these Africans, having moved from Nigeria, Benin, Niger, with the forts and castles here, should tell us they were walking, of which mostly I use Accra as my reference. Imagine if today you were asked to walk from Accra or Kumasi to Cape Coast Castle. The journey and the struggle before you probably make it here. But then this time around, beyond the borders of Ghana, they had to walk. A lot of them died, because coming in here, wild animals would attack some of them. Some probably would get drowned in rivers. Others as well, tiredness and hunger would kill them. And for you to make it to the coastline, because of the journey they were taking, they created resting points. And here in Ghana, we call them the slave markets. So from the north to the south, places like Salaga, Pikoro, Yindi, Tunu were slave markets. Winchi, Kintampo, Bonomansu, Kumasi was the middle belt. Then they moved them to a town called Asin Mansu. Asin Mansu, they had a river, and that was where the captives were given their last bath as Africans. They gave them food to eat to regain some strength. The beard and hair will be shaved so they look younger for the trade. Then shea butter will be smeared on the skin. The purpose of the butter was to heal their wounds and also make them look attractive, because they were bringing them here to auction. Once they got to this castle, there's a room above us called the Palava Hall, which was their marketplace. Over there, nurses, doctors would have them examined, just to know how strong they were, had them grouped into domestic and commercial slaves. The domestic ones were those going to work in the castle, and the commercial slaves were those to be exported. Then right after the groupings, they start to auction or to sell them. Goods like gunpowder, mirror, alcoholics, fabrics, leatherwork, ceramics, metallic objects like bangles, beads, tobacco, sugar, and other things were what they were using in exchange for the Africans. Right after the exchange was done, right at this point, they will have them branded or marked. So they line them up, they set fire, would place in metals that had their embossed designs underneath them. So when the metal was red hot, from the fire into an oil to any part of your body, it would stab. So it could be your chest, your shoulder, your back, or your arm. Some of them were pierced with darts, and others were given metals like antimony, just to easily identify them according to the company that had them purchased. They separate the males from the females. The males are going to a different place. The females also over there to await their ship. But then once you were within the castle, you actually went. So the structure that we see here, I'm probably going to credit it to the English. But then get to know the labor work happens to be the enslaved Africans. I made mention a lot of forts and castles were built here. Out of the numbers, only 3 were castles, of which the first ever European structure to be built on our land happens to be the St. George's Castle. Popularly today we call it the Elmina Castle, which was built by the Portuguese around 1482. The second is the Christianborg or Yesu Castle, which was also built by the Danish around 1661. And the last is where we are all standing today, Cape Coast Castle, also built by the English around 1664. But then out of the 3 castles, Cape Coast happens to be the only castle that was built purposely for the transatlantic slave trade. So if we are talking about castles, this happens to be the smallest and the last castle to be built by the Europeans. But then when you're talking about dungeons, the castle we see here happens to be the largest dungeon to be built by the Europeans. Once you hear about the transatlantic slave trade, it is actually talking about a trade that happened within three continents, which was Europe, Africa, and then the Americas, that took almost 300 to 400 years to end. And the whole trade started around the 1500s, when the Europeans actually were seeking routes to India, or let me say Asia, to trade. That was where they ended up in the Americas, where plantations like sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, coffee, and others were established in large scale. Earlier, natives from those lands were subjected to work on the plantations, but due to the hardship, they were dying. The natives got introduced to diseases like measles, pox, influenza, syphilis, and others, which was killing them. Because they were owners of the land easily, they could escape from the plantations. So they had this Catholic missionary, the name Bartholomew de las Casas, who was like they should shift the demand to Africa, because Africans are strong. The African system can withstand both tropical disease as well as the European diseases. And looking at the condition in Africa and the work the Africans were doing, it was similar to what they expect them to do in the New World. So moving them there would be of their best advantage. The then Pope was by name Pope Nicholas V. And Pope Nicholas also had the powerful of the decree signed, and that actually commenced or started the trade. And in here they had different ways to get the slaves. Some Africans were raided, kidnapped along the coast by the early Europeans themselves. Some were convinced to join them to the New World because of the skills and knowledge they had. But then once you end up in the New World, whatever you were promised wouldn't be given. But then a lot of them that were brought into the castles happens to be as a result of tribal wars that we had in Africa, which amounted for over 60-70% of the Africans brought in. But then the trade wouldn't end in Africa, because after all this, when they moved them to the New World, plantation owners would have them exchange with sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, coffee, rice, and others. Raw materials are sent to Europe to be transformed into finished goods, and all finished goods would move here for the cycle to start again. That gave us the triangular trade, or the transatlantic slave trade. So basically, that is the system. If tribal wars brought a lot of them here, so when they were brought out to work, some would want to fight the officers, others too would want to escape from the castle. Doing that, they were seen to be rebellious, and for that, the rebellious ones had to be killed to deter others from escaping or fight them. So what they do is, in the presence of other captives, they had them beaten out here before they moved them into the cell with 3 doors blocking them, no food, no water, no air, and no light. So you get dehydrated, you suffocate, and then you die. But then the sad aspect is, let's say they sent about 5 or 10 people in there. The soldier that will be assigned at the gate, his duty was to be sure all those sent in there were dead before the bodies moved out. So if he moves in, realize 3 were dead, leaving the 2, he wouldn't take the 3 out. He waits till the last person dies. Bodies will be laid on the floor for others to see it. So that next time, if you also want to repeat the same thing, remembering what you saw on the floor would deter you from escaping or fighting. Then the bodies move into the sea. So today, our first place to visit will be the condemned cell. It is a little bit smaller, so I wish those that go in first will move to the far end so that others can also move. So please, let's visit this cell. For us today, there is no door here, no door in the middle, and the first door over there. So imagine having 1 or 2 doors blocked for us to stay in here. And like I said, until the last person was dead, nobody left this place. That is why today some prefer calling this chamber the room of no return, because you enter the place as a living being, but then only dead bodies were to be taken out. I wouldn't want anyone dying in here, so please, watch your head. Alright, so we have 5 chambers in here. The first, second, third, fourth, straight to the fifth one down there. And by the estimate we have in here, just this room we are standing, when fully loaded, can hold about 150 to 200 of the Africans. So mathematically, the 5 chambers can take about 700 to 1,000 humans. But then get to know they were hunted, they were raided, kidnapped through warfare, so the place wouldn't always be filled with captives. Sometimes a chamber could even be less than 50. But then because of the conditions down here, not all of them actually were to make it out of this point. Once they were brought in here, they expect them to defecate, urinate, sleep in the same conditions, sometimes had to eat in here. A lot of them got sick, because keeping them in communicable disease easily will spread amongst them. And aside that, the unhygienic condition will add up to the illness. Cholera, malaria, fever, diarrhea, and others. If you were to die in the dungeons, get to know there wouldn't be any befitting burial for you. The bodies will be loaded in sacks. They add cannonballs to give it weight. Then we'll dump all the bodies into the ocean. So the sea out there happens to be mass burial for a lot of the Africans that died in it. On the floor, you would probably get to see some trenches or drainage system, and they were serving as passage for waste in the dungeons to move into the sea. And once they were in here, because the whole place was filled with captives, some of them probably might defecate on the top part of the bricks. So the domestic captives would sometimes come in here to clean the place. Because they were not doing that on a regular basis, before they walk in, some might have stepped on the poop and others are making them stuck on the floor. So what they could get from this place, they do so. The rest, they had to cover them with sand. And that started creating layers in the dungeon. The year 1974, we had some group of archaeologists from the University of Ghana. They came in here, had this chamber excavated, and that was when they discovered the bricks that we stand on to be the original floor. So they took samples of what they got from this place to their lab to be tested. And the results they had actually proves, is on which we go in here for me to move in a little bit. Thank you. So the results they had proves what they left here, as well as everything we work on from the second to the fifth chamber. If you don't see a break, it is to tell you are standing, or probably you are seeing toilet, vomit, sweat, blood, food particles. So things that humans mostly excrete and eject from their system mixed with sand, food, and blood is what we see here. They left this place and the other chambers unexcavated just to serve as a proof, so that if you don't believe, samples are all over that you can get to also test to prove whether they contain human DNA or not. Once a captive was brought to the castle, you probably could stay in here minimum just a day, but the maximum you could stay in almost over 3 months, because until the ships were ready, you probably wouldn't leave the castle. Out of the 5 chambers they had here, only the first one had a gate, because those that were kept in this room were mostly seen to be the aggressive ones, and they were those that mostly were in chains, staying in the dungeons. As the last chamber, and this place was also used for the selection of the captives. When ships were ready, the soldiers would walk in here in chains. They grouped the Africans, but then grouping them, those that were seen extremely weak were kept over there at the extension for the strong ones to leave. Once they leave the castle, then probably they bring them back. If you heal, you join the next available ship, but if you die, like I said, your body moves into the sea. It's unfortunate today we wouldn't go to the tunnel, because in the year 1834, Captain George McLean, who used to be the administrator or the president of the merchant, was asked to block the tunnel, symbolizing the English ending slavery. The English had a law passed 1833, and the following year the tunnel was blocked. But in other areas, some other Europeans were still smuggling the captives, because historically, the last ship left Benin to Alabama 1860s, telling us even in between those periods, still captives were being transported. Blocking this tunnel should tell us this was also not part of the dungeon system, because if there should be a tunnel, this wouldn't be there to block them. But then before the land was given to the first European group to trade here, the natives had a deity they worship on this land they call Nana Tabi, which is the rock. But then when they gave the land out, they were asked to leave the place. So they left with 2 of the stones to the town. The castle we see here was officially given to Ghanaians in 1960, when Ghana became a Republican country, and then 1973 the stones were brought back. So today, those that still believe in this system, they still do come in here to worship. If you happen to be a Ghanaian, I'm sure you might have heard of the 77 deities of the Yoruba people. Locally, they call them Abosomedi Osonso. And out of the deities, the stone that we see happens to be the leader amongst them. So just as we know they are within their festive season, just yesterday they came to make some rituals here to appease the gods, and they sent it out. That is why you're seeing some glass views here. If there is any question, you let me know. If not, at the other end, you will see reeds. And the reeds that we see here were brought in by visitors like yourself. I made mention if you die in here, the body moves into the sea. But then for us, we have the belief that their souls are still in the castle. So when visitors bring them, we don't let the sea. Rather, we keep them in places like this to honor, respect, and remember the dead. So when you see them anywhere, they serve the same purpose. For that, we have them here. Please. The tunnel was the bigger one. I'll show you the depth of the tunnel when we go outside. If you have to look at where I stand in between my legs, moving up this way, you probably see bricks popping up. And what it is telling us is that if you are to excavate this place, there should be bricks filling the whole space. So whatever that you stand on at the moment happens to be the toilet, the vomit, and other things I made mention in the first. And if you have to look at this point, the bricks actually moves in a straight line, which is telling us that from this point up here happens to be the thickness of the waste. So over these years, they stopped using the place as a dungeon. We still could get waste as thick as we are seeing here. Then just imagine when the captives stayed down here, how high the waste probably would have been. And I'm sure they wouldn't be this solid as we stand on. That was softer, and would also produce a lot of sickness in the dungeons. Please. All right, so earlier I made mention some Africans also got themselves involved by supplying their prisoners of war to them. Others also gave them land to settle. So having done that means Africans played a role. So the chiefs in Ghana, 1992, brought this flag to render an apology for African involvement in the trade. And as well, this should also remind us so we don't forget the past, to repeat the same mistake again. It reads, in everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. And may humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this. Say in a living being, if you wouldn't want yourself enslaved, then never should you get yourself involved in this slave activity. That was why they brought this right now. Barack Obama were left here because they were the only ones that had inscriptions as to the person buried underneath. Out of the 4 graves they left here, that is the only African that was buried amongst the Europeans. The name, Philip Kwaku. Originally he is a Jiri from this town. Kweku's father was one of the middlemen that were supplying the Europeans with captives. So the role of the father got his son the scholarship, together with other 2 guys. But unfortunately, the 2 guys died when they got to England. When he got there, being baptized into the Anglican faith, they gave him the name Philip. And his name Kweku also got mispronounced to Kwaku, and that made him Philip Kwaku. Age 24, he became the first black man to be ordained as an Anglican priest after he completed Oxford University as a theologist. And the following year, he was brought back to the same castle. So right up there, he was serving as a clergyman, a head teacher, and an interpreter, whilst other Africans were staying beneath him. Philip served the castle for almost 50 years before he died. Personally, I know nothing he did for or against the trade, because you being there, you can't tell them what to do. Get to do. The same trade also got him that scholarship. But at the point, treatment for him here was very poor. His salary was not coming. So what mostly he was doing was to move to the town so he could commerce to feed himself. And through that, this man taught the natives how to read and write English language. That is why here in Ghana, we do attribute the Western education to him. So the first basic school that was built then Gold Coast era has been named after him as the Philip Kwaku Boys School, which is about 7 minutes away from this castle. You see the school. Age 75, Philip died 1816. The English themselves had him buried here. But then the rest we see are all Europeans. The first one here is by name C.B. Whitehead. This English soldier, lawyer by profession, we don't know what actually killed him. Age 38, around 1812, C.B. Whitehead died. The middle is a lady, her name Letitia Elizabeth London. And London was here to visit MacLean, the husband. She got here, barely 2 months, she was found dead in the husband's room. When she died, rumors spread she poisoned herself. All because when she came, she got to know the husband, having stayed here for almost 8 years, was an African mistress. So out of she took the poison. But then some do say the mistress rather came to the castle, with the help of the husband, they poisoned her. All because after she died, some years back, MacLean actually had a baby with the mistress. So they do say they just wanted to clear off so that probably they continue with their affair. And others do say none of these two happened. rather she had malaria. She was 36 when she died around 1838. And the last over there, George McLean, very popular in our history. Remember I made mention McLean blocked the tunnel connecting the faith chamber to the door of the gate of no return. But then before the Europeans came, we already had our customary laws. But then McLean happened to be the man to introduce us to common law. So the first court of justice he established was right up there. He was appointed as the first judicial assessor. Today, they probably call him the Chief Justice. And through that, he designed a very popular treaty in Ghana we call the Bond of 1844. And that same bond also laid foundation for our colonization for 130 years. Age 46, malaria confirmed also killed McLean around 1847. So McLean 46, Tisha 36, C.B. White 38, and Philip Kwabo 75. These are the graves that we have in the council. Please, let's see the church. And in the third chamber, I pointed to a hole saying that walking in and out of the church, you will probably see, smell, and hear everything. So that is what we saw not long ago. So the hole right here, hard bars, but you can probably see everything that's happening there, smell, and hear. And that is the church, the society on the propagation of the gospel. Surprisingly, it is not only Cape Coast Castle, these things will happen. If today you are to visit Elmina Castle, you see the Portuguese having the Catholic church right above the slave market. But then the Dutch took over the Elmina Castle. They built their own church right on top of the female dungeons. If you visit Osu, when the Presbyterians came in, they first settled there before they got to the town. And if you are coming from Accra to Cape Coast, there's a port with the name Amsterdam. And Amsterdam also had a church right above the name, and they called the Dutch Protestant church. So most of the churches they started was right above dungeons until later either go to the town or move to another places. When the whole trip ended, the church as well as the school for the mixed race was converted to a broadcasting booth until the late 90s to early 2000s became a library. Today it is still an active library for kids, and that is the new entrance because we didn't want any kid moving in there to fall into the pit. So for that, question, comment, if you have any.
So were there any reason why they were active?
Some historical books will tell you it was just to show the supremacy of the Western world. Because if you had your God and your God can allow me to enslave you, worshiping my God should be directly above you, showing that my God was superior to my gods. And I always say myself, I'm saying this all because sometimes when you say the Christian, but the truth is Christianity was never introduced to Africa and for us to see. Rather, it was one of the biggest tools they used to enslave us. So when they came, they knew the whole gospel, but rather they were telling the whole aspect. So when they wanted to deceive them, they first told them Jesus Christ was a black person. That's what the discussion. But when they were bringing them a picture of Jesus, they gave them white Jesus. So probably what you read in the Bible, they want to see is different things. Angels are all white. So how come Lucifer was an angel and became black? So probably when you see yourself, that means you follow that aspect. And they made them believe that there's nothing good on earth. All you need is in heaven. So probably whatever you have, get to prepare it in heaven. So before you can go to heaven, it's only two ways. One is for you to be poor, and two for you to be meek. So always when you're submissive, time can control you, and when you're poor, you're easily with influence. So through that, they have an enslave to the system instead of so that is it. Inside the governor's reception area, before being to the dungeons, and I'm sure we experienced the heat down there. Once you move into the reception, the feeling itself is different. The type of vent he had here, and over there is his personal office. So once they appointed as a governor, that was where you had your documentation and others written, and here you will see your visitors. Whatever you stand on here are not original, we've restored them. But then when you cross to this place, everything you walk on till you get to the governor's room is still original. And these are peach pine wood from Europe, still original, and these are restored. So English brought these weapons to protect themselves from enemies or intruders. Talking about enemies, I mean, let me use in terms of the Europeans, let me use the Dutch, the French. It could be pirates or probably the Asantes that were actually the enemies of the English here. But then because they knew enemies would fight them, bringing this, it helped them to stay here for a very long time. The castle we are seeing here, I made mention, was built by the English. But then the land itself had been used by 4 different Europeans before the English came in. The Portuguese happens to be the first settlers on our land. They built the Elmina Castle, but at the point, a section of the Portuguese merchants came here. They built a timber lodge, stayed in for almost 100 years until the Dutch fought them at Elmina. So they had to leave Elmina and later abandon this place. The Swedish took over this land. The Swedish built a fort, stayed here for almost 5 years until the Danish also fought them. Danish stayed for 2 years in that same fort. The Dutch came in for the Danish. The Dutch stayed for an extra 3 years, and English also took over. So the English expanded the fort they had here into a castle, and they stayed for 296 years. But then when they came, just as I said, they expected enemies to come. So they actually brought these weapons and built 2 forts to keep an eye on the castle. So if you look up on the hill, the white building with a red cap over there, that is Fort William on the east. And on the west, because of the trees you can't see, there's one also called Victoria. So Victoria and William served as watchtower. So that soldiers out there, when they see intruders from the land or the sea, they signal those in here in the morning by waving flags, in the afternoon by using mirrors as reflection, and evenings they use torches or moshkos to give them signals. So that soldiers will get here, they put in gunpowder, they place the ball at the mouth, they light the match from the end. A ball like this would hit the enemy ship, water goes in and it sinks into the sea, and that helped them surviving here for that long period. But then some of the cannons, or let me say the balls, had holes in them, so they load powders in there so that when they hit the ship, they probably explode, and that also helped them as well. And if you remember, I made mention when the captives got to the castle, they had a place where they would examine them, just to know their strength, had them grouped into domestic and commercial captives before they marched them forward. So the traders also, according to your physique and your strength, would help them decide as to whether they should exchange you with the gunpowder, the mirror, the sugar, and other things they brought in here before they moved them downstairs to get them branded. But then before this end was built, everything was done at the courtyard until this section actually was built, and that's what they moved it. This same Palaver Hall we stand is where some 8 Ulster chiefs also met with Commander Hill, Captain George McLean, and some 2 other English officials to sign the bond of 1844, the same bond that laid foundation for our colonization for 113 years. The agreement of the bond signed on the 6th of March 1844, Gold Coasters were supposed to gain their independence in 1944 because they said 100 years. But 100 years came, they couldn't gain independence. That was why when Kwame Nkrumah actually came in, he was actually fighting for self-government now because he said 100 years to why just after the 100 years. And with the back and forth, it took them 13 good years. And Nkrumah also chose that same day, 6th of March, to mark exactly 113 years the bond was signed in this room. Ghana gained independence on the 6th of March 1957, but it took them extra 3 years, 4 months before Ghana became a republican country. That was 3rd July 1960. This year it is exactly 67 years Ghana became an independent country, and also 64 years Ghana being a republican country as well. The floors, ceilings, doors and windows here, everything has been restored. They are not original, as you see. So please, to the door of no return. Alright, so the door or the gate of no return. Originally, the door they had was a very short and narrow door, of which one person probably can fit through at a time, others would follow. And today we are having a bigger door because at the point the English made this town the capital city of Gold Coast. And the castle we see here became their administrative quarters. So that made them expand the door so that goods would be moving out of this place. Until the year 1877, they moved the city to Accra. And today Accra is still the capital city of Gold Coast. Or let me say present day Ghana, sorry. Africans that left this castle never returned back. And for that, they got the name Door of No Return. You lose your right as a human being, you lose your connection with your people, and also get to lose your identity as an African. And I'm saying you lose your identity all because, please, Morrison. Morrison. Okay, I wouldn't pick Morrison today. Please, your surname.
Hobson.
I wouldn't pick Hobson too. Oh. Any Ghanaian again? Tete, probably from Adangwe or Accra area there. Any Ghanaian, I want the surname. Or say Anakan. From Vota or where?
No, Adangwe.
Adangwe, so Adangwe, okay. Edu, another account. So let me use just these names. I could guess where some of them are coming from based on the names they gave me. But I didn't pick their names because the names are more of Western names as well. So let me say today, this man is from Accra. It's, let's say, Nimati. She's from Volta region, let's say Esinam. the man here in Asante, let's say Amankwa, Fanti over there, let's say Mensa, from Yoruba, let's say Mecca and others, don't care where they picked you from. Once you get to the plantation, all of you are going to be Christianized with names like Thomas, James, Stephen, Peter, Mary, and others. If the master happens to be Swansea, automatically all tend to be Swanseas. So let me say Thomas Swansea, Stephen Swansea, everybody get the same because you become his property. You speak different dialects, and because of the language barrier you can't communicate. So the best option is for us all to adapt to the master's language. So years to come, the Asante, the Konkomba, the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Benin will speak the same language, bear the same name. So the descendants yet to be born will lose their identity. You walk out of this castle, you lose your right as a human being because you could be killed at any point and as and when they wanted to do so. The business those days was backed with insurance. So as to whether you survived or died, once records were taken, probably they still make profit. So the focus was not the human lives, rather the money they were making out of them. A lot of the Africans had never seen the sea before because majority of them came from the inner lands. So having seen the sea for the first time got them scared, thinking they were going to be killed. And once they put them on canoes, taking them into the bigger ships, they themselves were jumping into the sea to commit suicide. Imagine someone like myself from Kumasi, because I don't know anything about sea and I don't swim as well. So if I jump into the sea, all those I'll pull with me, if I can't swim, you also can't swim, so we're all going to die together. When you make it to the bigger ship, they had them laid on flaps like sardines, head, tail, before they transport them. Historically, the largest number made it to the south. Brazil had the highest concentration. Some made it to Argentina, Colombia, and others. Some were taken to the Caribbean lands, places like Haiti, Jamaica, Barbados, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and others, and some taken to the north. Florida, North, South Carolina, Mississippi, Virginia, New York, Canada, and others, and some taken to Europe. And Europe to England had the highest number. France, Netherlands, Denmark, Portugal, Spain, and others. And today, we probably see blacks spread all over on the world. We are moving out of the door, the gate of no return, but for us, we are sure to return to this. So the captives were using the door or the gate of no return over there, but then the soldiers, the merchants transporting them wouldn't use that same door, rather the bigger door there. So before they would even walk out, being commanded at the other side by the soldiers, some soldiers would already be here. So they would move them onto the canoes, and the canoes would pick them into the bigger ship, and that was where some of them were jumping to commit the suicide. Because of the activities within and around this area, this whole place had the name European Beach. A place meant for only European activities. Today, it happened to be a fishing village, but the name is still maintained. Locally, they call this place Abrofo Mpuano, meaning the same thing as European Beach. Just at the flip of the door of no return, happened to be the door of return, telling us that we are all to return back to where we came from. We had this door of return in the year 1998 when we celebrated our first Emancipation Day. We call it the Big or the Great Homecoming Day. Descendants of those that survived the journey were asked to come back home so they interact and feel their land again. The living coming here never came alone, they rather came with their ancestors, so they brought two of them. One was to represent the Americas and the other was to represent the Caribbean. So from New York, a man by name Samuel Carlson, and from Jamaica, a lady by name Madame Crystal. These two remains were brought to a place in Ghana called Abanzi, where they have Fort Amsterdam. So Amsterdam, they didn't use the land again. Rather, they had to use the Atlantic Ocean through the same door or gate of no return. That was just to break the chains and the chains that said no slave would return. But in the same way they took them from this place, the same way the ancestors and themselves used that door in here, saying the chains had been broken. Rituals were performed in the castle. Remember, not all that came out of this place were from present-day Ghana. Some came from Nigeria, Burkina, Togo, and others. Ghana was the transit point because of wanting gold, and gold made a lot of them staying here as well for their trade. Bodies were taken back to a place called Mantle. So today we visit that site, the grave of Crystal and Carlson rest peacefully over there. And recently, that was 2019, we celebrated the year of return. So we had one from Barbados, so now there are 3. From Jamaica, from New York, and Barbados. You see them right at where they have the slave river. We are about to end our tour. So if you have any question, comments, contribution, you let me know before I conclude everything. But then if there is no question, I always do say the best person that should be narrating the history should be this castle. Because the castle we are seeing here actually experienced all I'm saying. None of us here were born those days to know exactly what happened in the castle. There is the possibility it never happened as I'm narrating, or probably it was worse to the extent that authors couldn't put them all in writer for us to also reference or research from them. In here, we don't frame stories to create any psychological trauma in anyone's mind. Neither are we trying to incite anybody to go out there to fight others for in the past. Neither is the history to cause segregation among races nor tribes. But we just want each and everyone that enters this castle to know the inhuman act, to know the crimes, the atrocities that happened some years back, so the living today can learn a lesson from the past. Because today we all claim slavery ended somewhere 1860s, but then deep in all of us here, we know we still live with the system now that's been modernized into different forms and different structures. In the world, we all know of racism, we know of imperialism, we know caste systems, we know this neo-colonial system, human trafficking here and there. Africa here, we know of tribalism, we know of colorism, we know child labor, economic and slavery, human trafficking as well and others. So it means the whole system has been given different things, being practiced as well. A living being, if you wouldn't want yourself enslaved, then never get yourself involved in any slave activity. It can happen to others and it can happen to any of us here. Living this place, let's become agents of change. Regardless of our race, our tribe, our gender, our religious beliefs, we're all humans. So what you want for yourself, if it is good for mankind, I believe all deserve the same thing. And most importantly, we should never forget about the past, because the past is there to guide us. So if you forget the past or try to rewrite history, the same mistakes our ancestors made, we're also going to repeat the same thing as well. So I thank you for coming to Cape Coast Castle. We end it here. Bye-bye.